Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of SJU. We got a great panel here today, and we got some fun stuff we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about franchises into the future. Future. Franchises to be, possibly. So looking forward to that. That's going to be a good one.
I wish we could walk in right now with like a cloak and the collar like on Conan. The future Cameron. Future. Sorry.
No, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. So let's introduce the panel. We have Riley Silverman, Vanessa Gritton, and Ed Greer. We got some good stuff we're going to be talking about. So y'all, it's franchise time. It's the world of IP. We live in the world of constant IP. Nothing dies. But does anything ever live?
Nothing ever ends, Cameron.
Nothing ever. It's just a constant cycle.
It's a vampire world. No one knew was born, but no one ever dies.
We are at a time right now. Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga has concluded. Infinity War, Endgame, all the big things over the last 10 years, and so now it's time to kind of either keep some things going, refresh, or start anew. So let's talk about some of the established franchises, and then we can go into the world as it could possibly be. So obviously we got Star Wars.
Yeah.
Got your Marvels, you got your DCs, you got your Harry Potters with the Fantastics of the Beasts.
Fantastics of the Beasts.
Fantastics of the Beasts. Jumanji.
It's on Key and Peele, like the Fantastics of the Beasts.
It's a mashup of the Fantastics off-Broadway show combined with Cursed Child. Try to remember.
Jumanji, so many levels.
Who is Jumanji?
Jumanji, the MMO.
I'm looking forward to that one. And I want the Jumanji, the hidden level, where you have to go through a wall.
Or just the water level Jumanji, where everyone's upset and nervous.
They hate swimming. Godzilla is going to be facing off against Kong. Yep,
I'm hoping it's a little more Kong and a little less Godzilla. I apologize for my mentions already for having said that.
Apologize to me.
No, what I'll say is that I think Skull Island was such a great movie that I want more of that kind of vibe. That's all.
Yeah.
No, I would agree.
That's my favorite Kong.
Oh, yeah, really?
It's my favorite one because it's the first one. Well, it's the first Kong that could also be considered Daikaiju, which is like a regular kaiju, but just huge. And it's the first one that really has like the scale of a lot of the other kaiju in universe, to where it doesn't just feel like an angry, oversized creature, but feels more like a force of nature and something that just has to happen. You got me started on kaiju.
My favorite Kong is the King of Kong, about the pinball, the arcade guys, not the pinball.
That's a close second for me. I agree with that, Riley.
I love when John C. Reilly falls around people the whole time. It says there's going to be a King Kong kill screen coming up at some point in the movie.
You got lost in that arcade for 30 years.
Well, yeah, I didn't know the arcade age ended.
And then Mission Impossible and Star Trek. So that is the current slate that we know is coming. What do you guys think of the state of franchise, where things are?
It's funny, the only one of those that you mentioned that's kind of dead is the Star Trek one. I really think it's weird. Movie-wise, I don't know, man. I think they're going to go right back to TV and heal up a little bit, lick their wounds. I don't think they're coming back to movies.
Well, they're making a new movie because was it Noah Hawley who did Fargo and Legion is doing the next Star Trek movie, so that has potential. But I'm a giant Star Trek fan, but I think that Star Trek works better as a TV series than as a film series. I think that as a film series, it always kind of lends itself turning into more of this like action adventure-y kind of thing. That's not what Star Trek is, but that's what the 2-hour film format tends to push it towards being.
Hawley's a great choice to kind of smarten that up and de-actionize it just the tiniest bit, enhance.
There's 2 movies currently being in development.
Yeah, there's two Trek films in development.
We haven't even talked about the Tarantino one, right?
Well, he's telling you that he might be.
It's less likely.
It's less likely. So there's 2.5.
But I would rather see a Noah Hawley Star Trek TV series than a Noah Hawley Star Trek film, personally. But I'm excited for it anyway because I think Hawley does. I love Fargo and Legion, especially Fargo. I am so obsessed with Fargo. So if I could see like a movie that takes that same level of like taking the way he took the Coen Brothers motif and made his own thing with it, if he can do that with Star Trek and keep it true to Star Trek, I'd be down.
Yeah.
So it's a clown.
So along with that, I guess possibly. So here's the question: for the decade that is ending, who do we think were the big franchise victors, and who maybe are licking their wounds?
Yeah, I think Star Trek. Yeah, obviously Star Wars. I mean, by the time people have seen this,
Yeah.
Star Wars is out right now, and it's doing very well.
I would imagine so. That'd be
Probably.
stunner.
Considering that it broke like the ticket sales apps for the first weekend, like even if no one sees it after the first weekend, it's doing great. Like it's doing fine.
I mean, Marvel's doing fine.
Yeah.
Marvel this last decade. DC,
Marvel's definitely the winner of the decade.
I think Marvel's the winner of the decade.
Yeah.
DC
Yeah.
falls, I think, somewhere in the middle. I think like they had a pretty rough. They stumbled out the gate. I think pretty hard.
I think their series is like crushing it. I think anytime they do something episodic, they like really hit that sweet spot. But I think you're right on the movie end where it's like they're kind of figuring out what works for them.
Well,
They tried
stumbled.
too fast to go into an epic series. They didn't do the Marvel move of like building it with like one franchise at a time until it combined. They did it as like we did Superman, and now we're gonna put them all together in one movie. I was like, maybe you should have done like a Batman movie, a Wonder Woman movie, and then do Batman vs Superman, and then do Justice League after you've already kind of established all the characters.
Yeah, they tripped a little bit, but then Wonder Woman did really well. Did really well. Aquaman did amazingly well.
Yeah.
Shazam, a lot of people really liked. Didn't make $1 billion, but not every movie has to.
No.
Yeah, and it didn't risk $1 billion.
And it didn't risk $1 billion.
You know,
so I
that's
feel
big.
like they stumbled pretty hard at first, but I think they're kind of, it's like that runner who trips at the gun, and then you're like, oh my God, he's still in the race.
Yeah. The difference between Marvel and DC as film things is that Marvel was using characters that weren't like the marquee characters, and they turned them into marquee characters.
Yes.
So they actually had to introduce them all to the audiences, whereas DC was starting with characters that everyone knew, by even people who don't read comics or watch comic movies, like knew them right away. And I think that's why it's like a different. They can't follow the same path. They had to kind of do their own thing, and they're learning that now.
I think that's exactly why the Harley Quinn series right now is working so well, because the Harley Quinn series, they're introducing characters that might not be as familiar to an audience that knows what they know of DC. So because we're like slowly getting to know a lot of these like proliferary characters, that's not the word I wanted. But like as we're starting to get to know that. Thank you.
You like combine prolific and periphery. Very, very prolific people in the wings.
Exactly.
I will also accept
Clayface is
tertiary.
Tertiary would have worked, yeah.
Also good.
I mean, Clayface is pretty prolific. But it's doing that where it's giving us these characters that we aren't as used to and letting us slow down and start to live with them a little bit.
Yeah, I think when you introduce characters that people don't have like a lore dump in their brain about it, like you're not running as much up to the, well, this isn't what this character does in my mind. Like I think that's why Guardians of the Galaxy was such a huge hit, was that most audiences didn't know the Guardians at all as characters, like your mainstream film audiences. Like whenever people like comic book nerds talk about like why movies didn't work, and there's always like, oh, they didn't follow the comic arc, and it's because they're not making the movie for the comic audience. Like the comic audience is already there buying the comics. They're making the movie for people who've never read the comics before and are going to enjoy the story that we're trying to sell them toys for. So then that's what Guardians, like I'm a comic book reader, but I didn't know anything about the Guardians as like I knew the basic idea of who they were.
Right.
That movie was like a fresh new space fun movie for me, and that was great.
Fantastic Beast, I think, is stumbling pretty bad at the moment.
Yeah.
See if they turn around with the third film, because they brought on the screenwriter from the Harry Potter films.
Yeah.
Who did those adaptations. So
they
Like some of that wonder and Marvel that existed before.
Well, yeah, it's almost like the Star Wars conundrum, right? It's like hard to determine, is this world the star, or are these characters who are in this world the star?
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch of people who think that the Skywalkers are the stars and not the world. That's like the new Civil War almost. It's like, is Star Wars the world where we could do anything with anybody, gangster stories, romances, epic whatevers, or is it just about us and our laser swords, we have a quest?
Yeah. And I think Star Wars is a little bit smarter about it because of the fact that they've had the extended universe novels, and they've had the cartoon series. Like you learned with Clone Wars and with Rebels to like follow other characters in Star Wars, and like the video game stuff like that. But Harry Potter didn't really do that before they just like decided to launch this whole new film franchise.
Well, I think the big problem is, for me at least, with the Fantastic Beasts movies, I feel like they're two kinds of films that are fighting each other. And I don't mean the two movies, I mean even within each film.
Sure.
Yeah.
Where it's like you can have Newt Scamander kind of having his fun animal adventure film. I mean, honestly, the new Fantastic Beasts should probably just be like Jumanji, like a little less winky, but more like fun adventure. I got to gather these animals kind of a thing, on top of like this murder witch who could see the Holocaust in the future, and you're like, what is happening? Like,
And also, what's up with and maybe this is me being what we talked about a couple times before about the egalitarianism of certain things. Like when the more a franchise expands, the more egalitarian it starts to get. You start to see what the janitors are doing. In Star Wars, we know what the space janitors are doing.
They're defecting and becoming members of resistance.
Right. So the bottom line is, it seems as though at this point we need to know more about why aren't there Muggles who like go from being a Muggle to a wizard person?
Yeah.
It's so, I don't want to say words for our world, but it's so kind of divisive and weird that you've accepted as Muggles are just dumb gene trash.
Yeah.
They can't wield my powers. Why haven't they had
punk
one?
band.
Yeah.
Gene trash.
You know what I mean? I don't know why that still is.
And also, what is the day-to-day life? Like, the problem I have and I used to be a really big Harry Potter fan, but like what bugs me about it a lot of times is understanding the like nitty-gritty of the society. Like, no one's learning math at Hogwarts in any of those books. So like, who's keeping the books? Like, what is a day job? The same thing with like Star Trek gets me this way a little bit too in the future. Like when you have episodes of Star Trek where you have like this character opens a restaurant or this character is a janitor at the academy, and I'm like, wait, why is this guy in a society where there's no money and there's no property? Why does Picard still get to have a vineyard? Like, because his family passed it down, so now we're just like stuck in this weird like hereditary wealth is out the norm for society, and but why does Begbie have to be a janitor at the Starfleet Academy until he dies? Like, why is that? Like, why are Harry Kim's parents owning like a restaurant, like a coffee shop? Like, wait, what? Like, why do people even go into coffee shops and buy coffee when you have a machine that makes all your food for you anyway? Like, that kind of thing.
It's hard for us to imagine a world without money. Yeah. And along those lines, for no reason other than a segue, I think we're missing the amount of money that Sony is racking up. You're right that DC's in the middle, and Sony might be more close to the head than the ass if we're looking at this. Because frankly, dude, they're making mad money off of Venom. Venom has now become a thing where auteurs can come in and play in the Venom sandbox. They got Andy Serkis getting his first big directorial debut.
Oh, they have that amazing
he did the Jungle Book. He did the Jungle Book on Netflix.
That Mowgli.
Oh, yeah. Well,
So
okay, fine.
I just like that you said the phrase auteur and then Andy Serkis in like the same breath.
His directorial debut was a movie called Breathe, starring Andrew Garfield in the UK before that.
No, nice.
That's right. That's right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, Vanessa just dropped some mad Andy Serkis knowledge on this.
But so these are the franchises that are. Let's talk about the franchises we wish to be. So going around, Ed, I'm going to go to you first. What's a franchise for you that you're like, the money just sitting there?
Okay, now I picked mine as almost challenges because both of them.
That's what a studio loves to hear when you go into pitch.
Well,
I dare you to make money off of this. I triple dog dare you. No one, only.
well, no.
You dweeb.
Well, no.
Only a well-endowed executive can make a lot of money off this one. Go for it.
To segue off of what Sony did, they took like an edge of. They took the hem of Spider-Man's cape and made $1 billion off of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think in that, but I think there's a lot of stuff from the '80s that we could reboot as movies right now in either the Lord and Miller fashion, where it's like we're not respecting it, but we're respecting the tropes while having fun with all of it.
Yeah.
And I think one of those main ones is Buck Rogers. I think
I would love to see Lord and Miller's Buck Rogers.
I think a Lord and Miller Buck Rogers is amazing because for those who aren't familiar with the story,
That high quality photo.
yeah. Okay, for those who aren't familiar with the story, Buck Rogers went on a space mission in the far-flung future of 1987. And he went off his orbit, yada, yada, yada. His instruments froze. He got froze like Captain America. He comes out 500 years in the future. And every damn episode is about all these space dudes from 500 years in the future needing an astronaut from basically prehistory, according to them, to help them with a problem. Every episode, he saves them.
It's unfrozen caveman lawyer, but in space.
Exactly. The equivalent of it would be like George Washington leading our military now. Wooden teeth and all, like, hey everybody, Operation Human Shield. You know, like, there's no way that he would know enough about our present military technology to do anything. So there's always this weird, ridiculous justification of how good he is. I'd love to see Lord and Miller's take on how we do that. Now, my girlfriend Clea, when she says it's going to kill me, because she thinks a really serious Battlestar Galactica style series could be made out of this.
It's interesting too because they are made by the same producer, and they are both attempts to like cash in the popularity of. I mean, Buck Rogers dates back to even earlier, but the Buck Rogers series from the '80s, they are both attempts to cash in on popularity of Star Wars. Like, we need our Star Wars TV shows. We'll do Battlestar and Buck Rogers, but
and Buck Rogers had a robot named Twiggy who was supposed to be their R2, but all he did was he was voiced by Mel Blanc.
They kept changing his voice too. So
yeah,
it's like
they changed it in like at the third season.
Yeah.
Me and Clea are watching the third season where they introduce the guy that Bird Person from Rick and Morty is based on. He's a character named Hawk who is from a race of birds who were bullied out of flying. Basically, they don't fly anymore because humans bullied them out of it. So they just have bird heads.
Have you gone on YouTube and watched the original like theme song from the movie that like the pilot movie? Because the theme song of the show is like it's the one that if you watch South Park, it's the Time Child thing from Cartman. They use that, but there's like this theme song for Buck Rogers where it's just like him laying on the words Buck Rogers and like a lot of like just women in like silver spacesuits like rolling over him and like spinning around and like flexing for the kid. It's the weirdest, most bizarre, very
I would love to see them like to kind of. We never see how somebody becomes Zap Brannigan. You know what I mean? Like, how does somebody? How is this weird largesse? You know, almost like Demolition Man, right? You pick some caveman out that can't solve your future problems for whatever ridiculous reason.
Right.
How is that? How could that work? Us making fun of the fact that we do prop up people because they look a certain way. The quarterback, you look like a quarterback, you're more likely to be a quarterback. If you look like the quarterback that somebody in 1950 has in their head. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we tend to ascribe people tall. A lot of CEOs are tall. For what? What? There is stuff on the shelf up there.
Right? That's how they pick their leaders in that universe, whoever the tallest is.
Right. Yeah. So I think us exploring this sort of caveman kind of coming into a future society and still being able to get his way from the same brutish, ridiculous tactics. I think Lord and Miller or somebody could really make fun of that really well, and it would be kind of an idiocracy in the future type of thing.
You got a green light. What about you, Grit?
The first one I immediately wanted to jump into is something that I feel like keeps getting a start and
talking about stumbling out of the gate,
getting knocked back into the dirt, and that is the Universal Monsters franchise.
You're gonna make an action franchise. You're gonna make an action film, straight action. They've been trying to do over and over again,
which is what they keep wanting to do. They keep wanting to take things that existed in the 30s, 40s, and 50s that were ways to work through current populist fears at the time and put it through the lens of but what if it was sexy action? And that's not really what was beloved about the original Universal Monsters franchise. No. It like I said, it examined current fears of the populace. It had this charm that you have when you get to live with certain characters, along with that little B-movie classic edge that you really love to it. And Dark Universe is dead. We might be getting a Dark Army, but what I would love to do with the Universal Monsters universe is take it into one of my favorite formats for horror and go anthology. I think the last few years we've seen a resurgence in the horror anthology, both with the Return of Creepshow, movies like Southbound, and how much people have this, not even so much love, but we're rediscovering things like Tales from the Dark Side and all of these really great, and Holidays, which just came out, which is another horror anthology series. We're kind of falling in love with these little mini micro stories where different directors get to live in these worlds for a smidge. And I would love to see a Universal Monsters anthology where we give up and coming horror directors that haven't really had a voice to do something grand, a monster to play with for a short amount of a time and then weave them together.
I think that makes sense too, because I think one of the biggest problems with trying to make Dark Universe type movies is like you said, making them in the action adventure thing. Yeah. And a lot of it's because we have to fill 2+ hours and make it this epic thing. Yeah. But if you're doing 3 shorter stories, you have the ability to be no, what is actually just a scary monster movie?
Exactly.
And we're not beholden to a set time length. We can tell a shorter.
We're not filling it with bloat.
Right. Exactly. That's a great idea.
How's your werewolf transformation happen?
Oh man, you've heard me ramble a lot about what werewolf transformations I'm passionate about. My favorite one is from Hemlock Grove because it's a wolf that pushes out of a human. I really want to kind of go in the direction of the werewolf transformation involving consuming the carcass of the human, because nobody ever really thinks about the scene of the event and the scene of the act and how they like cover up for it. So I very much like the idea of a big old wolf eating some human guts.
Pretty good.
But also, you made me think of like, why doesn't anybody just do action werewolf? Action werewolves are awesome.
Yeah.
They're like Teen Wolf, like we're Wolf Cop. I mean, and see, again, and I want to make him a cop. I make him a hardcore mercenary with a scar. No, I'm just joking. But action wolf stuff, I'm just surprised there's not more of that.
Werewolf transformation where he grabs the top of his jaw and then the bottom of his jaw and then he rips and then werewolf.
The Beetlejuice?
Like, yeah, I was thinking too.
Beetlejuice and then just like rip off a human skin and then you get
And
a
then
werewolf.
somehow has a flannel shirt on for some reason, like all
Still,
werewolves
like
do.
somehow, like he's in a 3-piece suit, but he just like rips into a werewolf in a flannel shirt.
Yeah.
The National Lampoon's parody version, you poop the wolf out. And just skin flaps down.
They say there are two wolves that live inside of us. And we have
The
to
mouth
decide
wolf and the poop wolf.
which one we poop out and which one we vomit out.
Bark at the moon.
I think you're right about trying to people's different interpretations because somebody's got to do a fresh interpretation of Dracula that isn't Blade Nemesis or
like that's my main issue with most Dracula stories where I'm like, there are vampire stories which are cool, like your Fright Nights and like movies that I love where we talk about vampires, but the thing is every time somebody goes for Dracula they want to do a vampire movie and that's not what that story is. It's not just, hey, here's vampires. It's the whole Dracula story.
It's like a vengeance and like sex.
It's vengeance and sex, and it's fear of the unknown. And I feel like a modern day vampire take would make especially a Dracula take, would make so much more sense in terms of like fearing the outsider, because that's something that is especially prevalent now.
Resonating
it's
right
fearing
now.
it's fearing the outsider. It's fearing the different thing, and that's how we can explore that Dracula story. Or even like, I know Blumhouse has their Invisible Man, but I've always like wanted to explore an Invisible Man story where it isn't necessarily what everyone does with an Invisible Man story, which is I can't see you. What are you doing? Where it's just like you could be doing anything right now. But I kind of like the idea of making the mass public the enemy of I can't see you. What are you doing? And the Invisible Man being like, why does it matter?
Yeah.
Why do you need to know what my actions are? Why do you need to monitor me? Why
I'm not an invisible animal. I'm an invisible human being.
I'm an invisible human being. Let me
Just
live in an
everybody
invisible
walking
piece.
around with whole pockets full of talcum powder, throwing it in the sky.
He's like, I just want to read books alone.
Well, and like your whole thing makes me think of too, like we didn't talk about Ghostbusters at all in our like pre-thing wrap up, but I think what's interesting about Afterlife is it seems like it's going to be a much more low budget Ghostbusters film than the last one and a lot of the other like franchise reboots. And I think like that's one of these things is they want to launch all these franchises, but then they spend $200 million on them, and then if they don't do well, it's like, well, that franchise is dead. Like, hey, what if you had spent $75 million to make a vampire movie instead of $150 million?
Turns out
like
horror comedies maybe aren't 4-quadrant pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
I also have a Creature from the Black Lagoon pitch where it's just Creature from the Black Lagoon in Florida. So it's Creature from the Black Lagoon meets Spring Breakers.
Oh yeah,
I've had that pitch
How is
for
that
a
not
long
already
time.
a movie? That's
I know.
fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm putting it on tape.
Yeah.
I'm putting it on tape.
Creature from the Black Lagoon with a Blake Bortles jersey on.
If I could have, I would have just rocketed into the sky through the ceiling.
Just have all those Florida rappers do the soundtrack.
Yep.
All right, we're just making this. We're just making our anthology.
Riley, what about you?
I picked Pirates of the Caribbean as my franchise that I would redo, and I think there's actually talk of it happening. But so my biggest, I love the Pirates movies. I think I held on way longer than anybody. I've seen all of them.
You held onto that ship while I was going down?
Yeah, exactly. But I think
I'm the captain now. Going under.
Yeah. Last time I went to Disneyland, I was there on a cold, rainy night, and I got a whole boat to myself on the Pirates ride, and I was the captain. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. But here's my thing about Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that it's a genius premise for a franchise.
Yeah.
And I think the first one especially really has a lot going on for it. And I think the best and worst thing that happened to that franchise is Captain Jack Sparrow. I think that
He's their Wolverine.
Yeah, the movie. Yeah, the first Pirates movie is one of the best just examples of like a great summer popcorn blockbuster film.
First one holds up great.
It holds up. It's super fun. If you watch that movie, the two characters you could say are your protagonists. I can rant for a long time that it's Elizabeth Turner or Elizabeth Swann / Turner later on, and then Will be the next one. But then the problem is that because Sparrow was like the breakaway hit character from that series. He then got like Frankensteined into becoming the lead of the franchise, but he's not a character so he's the best thing that happened to it in that he was so popular it meant there were more movies.
Yeah.
He's the worst thing that happened to it in that it creatively handcuffed any future films in that series because he's not a character that can go through any growth or development or anything, or he stops being what's great about
every
him.
villain after that, how it's like, I got a past with you, Sparrow.
Yeah.
Every villain.
And it's just like, it's like every film was like, how is Jack Sparrow going to drunkenly buffoon his way through this plot?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's great for a sidekick character. It's not great for your core protagonist of your series. And the thing is, what Pirates has going for it is this very like high fantasy on the high seas adventure story thing. There's so much great ocean lore or like pirate stories or just like monsters you can bring into it. And like even in the bad Pirates movies, which is like 4 of the 5, but no, I actually love the last one. It's pretty great too. But in the worst one, which is the 4th one, there's this sequence with mermaids in it that I don't think Sparrow's even in the scene. And it's like this quiet, dark mermaids singing to the pirates on this like rowboat, and then like they're like it's actually like this ambush scene. I remember watching it like in the dark. It gave me chills. Like it was so good. And so I just would like to see them take the premise of those movies and just make more of them. And like maybe I think it seems like they want to move on from Jack Sparrow, and I think that's the best thing it can do for it. Like the name's gonna be there. You just need to get a big star. I've heard rumors of Karen Gillan being talked about to maybe play the red pirate from the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. I have no idea how true that is.
Like that.
The source that I got it from was not super reliable, so I don't know.
Some drunk guy at a bar.
Yeah, it was actually Karen Gillan on a plane. No,
I gotta tell you, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, I think there is such a great potential for an action adventure high seas franchise there,
right,
that could be pulled out of it. And I think you just need to have a hero that can actually go on more stories and have growth and development and like things like that happen with it.
I would love for them to kind of try to, I don't know, they try on the edges to kind of put some of the people that are in those areas, like some native Bahamians and stuff like that. But like, I'd really kind of lean into that. Like some of the there were times when certain people became pirates because they had to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I would love to explore some of that history where it's like, hey man, I'm a dread pirate, but who exactly has dreaded me? A bunch of jerks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd love to see that.
Well, and like in history, like if you were a pirate or a soldier, depending on what side of the battle you were on. Like we think about like Francis Drake, who was basically like a hero to the British but a pirate to the Spanish, because like that kind of stuff. So that element could be there as well. And there is a like I think it's a deleted scene or like a kind of like buried subplot that part of why Jack Sparrow is considered a pirate and an outlaw is because he wouldn't sail a slave ship, and like he basically like because there's like a line, it's like people aren't cargo, and like that, but like because Jack Sparrow's this drunken buffoon character that got lost in the mix somewhere, and like you need to have those kind of stories if you're going to do stories about that era of seafaring. Like you're right. There's a lot of cultural stuff that needs to be brought in to make the stories more fleshed out and real.
Love it. I'd love to see more of that. For me, I went Nightmare on Elm Street. Bring it back, man. You're bringing back every other horror franchise. I think like I love the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I think and just do the Halloween thing. Just bring back Robert Englund. Just put him in that makeup again. He's done his time, I'm sure, but there's a part of me that's also just like, you know what? Just give him one more. Put him in the makeup. Like it doesn't matter that he's like aged. We don't have to worry about digitally de-aging burnt-ass Freddy Krueger.
The way that can actually work is you can even just go full Tinkerbell with it, where it's like less people talk about the legend of Freddy Krueger, so now he's like old and decrepit.
So it's like I love that series. I think it's also now there's a chance to be really creative with it, and also that series worked because the first film there was so much being played with, but also the fact that so much of it was about divorce in the 80s and how teenagers were kind of now on their own. And I think there's now such a different degree of what a teenager is, but also now still very much being left on their own. And what is cyberbullying and all these other things. And I think having like that kind of character, I think like now's like a really interesting, good time to have a Freddy Krueger come back and have Robert Englund do it. And I don't care about the continuity. I don't have to be like, oh, well, he's dead in the last one. I'll be like,
dreams don't make sense.
Yeah, just Jesse's back. Just like just the kids suddenly finally, oh, he's back. How'd he come back? Who gives a shit? Just move forward. No, I love the Freddy Krueger character, and so I'd love to see that series come back. I'd love to see Robert Englund in the chair, and I know that apparently there's talks that the Wes Craven estate is listening to pitches.
Well, and to talk about like the budget thing earlier about saying like new franchises have lower budgets, that's one that I feel like could benefit from a larger budget because you can do so much more to make a nightmare seem scary. And like thinking about like what they did like in Doctor Strange and like episodes of Legion
or
and stuff
like
like
It. I mean, I saw It on the Warner Brothers lot, one of the few movies I've actually gotten to see before it came out and stuff like that. And I was genuinely, the person I was with was just like gripping me, and I was like, you got to stop that, dude. This is not that scary. And then something happened. I was like, you know. And it's just like, it was like I was trying not to be scared. I was with a bunch of executive dorks who don't really react to stuff, but it was still that powerful. Certain parts of it, at least, of the first one, were so powerful that I could see that sort of treatment given to Freddy. Yeah, he's never had an actual budget. It's always like the best we can do with X amount because we're New Line.
And I think Warner Brothers now owns New Line, so I think they own Freddy, and they did it. So I think like it wouldn't shock me if in the next year we hear like, oh, the Conjuring producers are going to be doing the next.
How well did Freddy versus Jason do? Because in the middle of your earnest talk about bringing it back and how it's relevant and all these things, I was just thinking about like Jason leading a super crew of all these mythological jerk dream characters, like my man Candyman over here, and this is the Dark Avenger, the Dark Universe of Freddy being like, I'm the Wolverine of this group, and that's my man Candyman, and that's my man.
I do highly enjoy that your Jason Voorhees voice is like my main man.
That's my main man Jason. And Jason's like boom, 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 and just swamp sounds.
So all these franchises. So let's say it. All these franchises have been picked up. My God, the first hits. Studio comes back. What else you got?
Okay. Now this one is even less probable than my first one.
Great. That executive is so happy to hear this.
I understand that. I do.
I double dog dare you to make money off this.
Hey, you know, Lord and Miller saying 21 Jump Street is a movie. That had to be the most psychotic thing ever.
Yeah.
And they got it done. So, and that's
22 is amazing.
Man, you were just.
Yes.
Are you being sponsored by Lord and Miller?
No, I gotta say, I do love them because I think their ability to go, there's something here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be taken as seriously as the dorks who love it think. And I'll be able to find some other thing. And also them getting credit for the Spider-Verse. Yeah. People thought that all that multiverse jazz and the Gwen Stacy and the this and the that was too complicated. They said, I can do it in a movie. I can do it in an hour and a half. Let's go.
And they made our favorite Spider-Man movie.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. I think that's sort of, I'm just saying this, I think Lord and Miller are symptoms of the way media is training us. I think there's going to be more and more Lord and Millers, and I would like to maybe be a Lord. You know, I'll never be royal, but maybe I'll be a Lord. So I really think that. So the bottom line is, my next thing would be the Lord and Miller up or Fast and Furious up Knight Rider. They've tried so many times to have look at Hasselhoff. Oh, he's so nice. He's gonna eat a burger off the ground in 10 minutes.
That's John Cleese.
Yeah, that is John Cleese.
I thought it was Feeney for a second because he's the voice of Kit, and I'm like, wait, was he on this show as a villain too?
Feeney is the voice of Kit?
Yeah.
That's true.
Oh my God! Yeah. Sorry, that was just the coolest thing that I'm gonna find out today.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, and so just very briefly, what I would try to do with it is, everybody goes, Knight Rider is stupid because everybody's got a talking car. My car talks to me, and it's a Buick. Your car doesn't talk to you in complex sentences. Your car isn't a damn AI, you stupid idiot. Oh, my car can park itself. That's the same as Kit. Your car can't turbo boost over other cars.
This studio executive is now looking at his Buick out the window.
Your car cannot turbo boost like the Tumbler. Idiot. Your car can't turbo boost like the Tumbler across the tops of Gotham City buildings. Yeah. Your car can't do that. Right. And Knight Rider can. And I just think if we enhance the Michael Knight character to where he's sort of a Bourne instead of just sort of a guy who drives a car, who's sort of a secret agent because he's kind of a cop, kind of a vigilante. We kind of know what his training is really to be handling all these situations, and half the time the car is Batman in a Batman Robin situation. The car is Batman. Lessen that a little bit. The guy's cool. He's like a parkour guy. He's a cool agent. He's a kick-ass dude who's doing all this stuff, and meanwhile there's a car doing stuff, and then they link back up.
Who voices the car?
somebody black.
JB.
Like
Smooth.
JB Smooth as Knight Rider would be hilarious.
It's a good casting.
Anybody with a list for being Knight Rider, like, we gotta get out of here. It's turbo boost.
I'm literally just imagining him from Curb Your Enthusiasm arguing with Michael over the temperature, like 72.
Look, I like it warm.
I like casting.
Michael Knight's just sweating.
The visual that I had in my head of your Knight Rider reboot, it was like it just shifted and changed as you were saying, like morphed into a new thing.
Well, no, I'm just saying, imagine a funny movie about the ridiculousness of somebody having to partner up with a talking car, and him saying all the jokes, like, oh, well, what's the difference between this and a Tesla, and Knight Rider being able to show you, oh yeah, I hacked everything, and I also got all this information, and also Vivaldi was overrated, and this is why. That's why it's better than your stupid Tesla. That's why it's a character, an actual AI in an indestructible car with a dude like parkouring off some stuff, and there's a car running through all the buildings Fast and Furious style, and he jumps into the sunroof off of another building, and he jumps into the sunroof, he's like, and he's facing backwards, like, what the hell's going on? And all that kind of stuff. Like, everything you've seen in a Fast and Furious movie, motivated by the fact that it's actually a supercar doing it. Half the things they have in Fast and Furious, these cars doing, they're totally incapable of, under all circumstances.
Yeah.
But this car could do anything. And if this guy is a badass agent with a car that can do anything, one person in the right place at the right time can make a difference, Ken.
In the right place, with a robot car.
With a robot car.
Hopefully the car gets you there.
Right. So I would just love to see either a serious by sort of a James Wan sort of or a huge action director, one of the people from the Bond franchise working with it. I think that could be cool. Mm. Or my man's Lord and Miller. I'm trying to get them all to work. Please put me on your team.
Gritton, what about you?
All right, so I'm feeling pretty confident when I talk to these executives because a guy just walked in and called them all stupid idiots.
The meeting before.
The guy before was like, "You're all stupid idiots. Give me your money." So I'm like, tight.
You're feeling like you got this.
I'm gonna pitch my Hail Mary. So it's a franchise that feels like it's been done in different versions, but I have an idea for how I want to take it differently, and it opens itself up to like series, toys, you name it, and I really want to bring the Gundam series to American audiences in a there it is.
Yeah, hardcore.
So I, growing up, have watched pretty much nearly every iteration of Gundam, and the lore is really interesting because in so many different cartoons, the way people pilot these also changes, because in some cases it's like they're almost like cars that they're like versus each other. In other cases it's more like this huge army. In other cases it's more like you're like a Power Rangers style stories. And I like that it's not as rigid in its mythos as, let's say, your Transformers series or your Voltron series are. So it
or your Knight Riders. Just say it. Just say it, Vanessa.
Like, of all your giant robots, I feel like Gundam is the giant robot series that lets you do the most with its stories. So you can have your series that's maybe a little bit closer to like the Gundam cartoons that you know, but then you could do a movie where, like, let's say it's several years into the future and there was a Gundam program, and now it's things are a little bit more let's say like a Mad Maxy, since we like dirt. So it's like a little bit more Mad Maxy, and every single Gundam is more like those specific like parts made of other parts vehicles that they pilot in that universe. So it's all like Gundams that mechanics like kind of put together, and these are the ones that are like left over, and they're all either like bounty hunters or couriers, and like these are their rigs that they pilot. And it lets you really have fun with the story, and again, it can go in so many different directions that you're not beholden to anything specific. Because if I ask other Gundam fans if we were going to reboot it, they wouldn't be like, this is what we have to do. They'd be like, oh man, which Gundam series do you want to go with?
So do they like fit together as bigger things like Voltron and stuff?
See, that's the other thing where like in some series it's like things that fit together. In other cases it's like Jaegers where they just like exist like as they are. So it has its own like lore that connects it within the universe, but it's open enough that you can go crazy with it.
Yeah.
And I very much like it more like the Pacific Rim Jaeger style, because I've always wanted to play with the giant robot idea of less like oh man, these huge giant robots that walk among us, and more like it's a big tank.
Yeah.
It's a big rig. I want somebody to treat the Gundam robots the way they treat like the Nostromo and Alien, where it's like, this is just our rig that we all work in.
Right.
Interesting.
Well, with that utilitarian thing, because everybody, if you think about it, cars, not to take it back to Knight Rider, but any sort of vehicle. No, I'm just saying.
I'll green light it. I didn't.
No. I'm just saying.
You came back into the room.
All I'm saying is, to somebody in the 1880s, any car is a Gundam.
Yeah.
Any car is just magnetic. How many horses are in that Model T? 13? Mind blown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, from a certain point of view, from a certain primitive point of view, any machine that we have is godlike. But once we get used to them, then they're nothing.
They lose their novelty.
A world where big giant robots are basically nothing. We got to get another pilot for this thing. I don't know, man. Nobody's passed the psych evaluations. Blah blah blah. Whatever. You know.
Exactly.
And like replacing the driver of like a truck. I know several truckers, and their attitude towards their rigs, their attitude towards the skill of like being in the back of a Ralph's and backing an 18-wheeler back right up to the dock to let people take all the kumquats off of it or whatever. That's amazing. That's an amazing skill.
It is amazing. I just don't know why you picked kumquats, but
Because it's the funniest fruit to name.
It's
or
the
vegetable,
funniest fruit to name.
but yeah, like that's exactly
Whatever
how I
that
perceive the
is.
series. So
So it's like Top Gun, but with
yes.
Oh yeah, that was genuine right there.
Riley. What about you? You've now heard. You saw this man go back into this
Yeah.
meeting.
First of all,
As
I
I
didn't
watched-
know it
as
was a
I-
meeting. I've had several meetings that I've never gone in going, guess what? Here's a franchise I'll never be able to touch. Here's my pitch.
As I
I've never
watched
gone that way.
security escort Ed out of the building.
Go in the cars.
Yeah. Cars! Your cars are stupid and you're stupid for liking them.
Tesla sucks. Edison forever. No, okay, go.
The one that I went to, this would not be a film franchise. This would be a new serialized TV show. I want to do a reboot of Sliders with the prestige TV budget that we're getting for these shows these days, because Sliders is a show that was a little before its time. For those of you who don't know Sliders, it looks exactly like that. Yeah, it's a show that was on in the 90s on Fox and then the Sci-Fi Channel and then canceled. And it was basically, the premise was that Jerry O'Connell figured out a bridge between universes, and he and his friends got stuck sliding through it, and then they kind of had a quantum leap thing where they couldn't quite get home because their sliding device was broken, and they had to like wait for it to count down, and they would jump through it. So, but the premise was that every episode they would slide into an alternate Earth, and so it was always a version of our Earth where history was a little bit different. Something had changed that made. So there's one where they slide to where America lost the Revolutionary War. There's one where they slide to where America lost the Cold War, and there was also these like someone like one of them like the character one of the characters in this thing is this blues musician named Rembrandt Jones, soul music. He's a soul man, and they come to a world where he's like the Elvis of that world, and like that world's version of him had faked his own death, and then this one shows up, and I was like, oh my God, Rembrandt's back or whatever. The problem with that show is that they were working on a 90s network television budget for this show of like, imagine all these amazing worlds you can go to. So all the amazing worlds you went to usually ended up being everyone's hanging out in a dusty basement trying to fix the world they're in. And like in the Rembrandt one, he's supposed to be Elvis, but then for his big backstage thing, it was like a black box theater, like you might do improv in somewhere in Los Angeles. So I think that like being able to do this show now and have the kind of like budgets that you could do, those like, I want those Game of Thrones budgets. I want those sets. I want to see this elaborate different Earth, because then you can, like the next episode, you can do something different and you can really make it feel like every world you go to is dramatically different than the ones you came from, because of the fact that they were beholden to like the sets they had access to. It made a lot of the episodes, even in like the first early seasons, because it goes off the rails as it moves from network to network and as stars leave the show. It goes, and at one point there's like a whole season where they're just like taking things from books, like we'll do a Dr. Moreau episode where there's a world where there's a scientist who makes animal human hybrids. It's like, well, now you're just doing whatever. But like, it kind of lost the idea of each episode as an alt history Earth.
Yeah.
And I think that if you just did like a 10 episode season where you didn't feel like you have to map out 25 episodes, you're able to like really think about like what this world you're going to looks like. I think you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it.
And also, what your character? How are your characters after being introduced to all these different worlds? That was the thing that was kind of lost in the original Sliders, as they started having so many adventures, and the fact that they always have to act the same sort of credulous or incredulous, depending on how you want to use the words.
Yeah.
Every time they see other stuff, they weren't able to grow as much. Just imagine how different you'd be. I mean, I remember one. It was kind of stupid. I don't remember all the plot details. What was interesting was in that world, not only were women in charge, but they were like basically as chauvinist as us right now.
Yeah.
And they were like the worst. So they're just like, what's up, doll? And they go smack Jerry O'Connell's
Yeah.
butt and stuff.
Is it
And he was like,
me?
and he was just like so blown away. But yeah, just how blown away everybody
Yeah.
was. And like, this is so horrible. And,
Yeah.
and the women in the group were just like, really?
Yeah.
Really? You do, for 5 seconds, you can't deal with what we've dealt with our whole lives? For 5 seconds? What's up? I would love to be able to see characters change as they enter different worlds. Like I'd love to go to a world where Rembrandt is like the normal person. I'm Rembrandt. I'm a soul man. Everybody's a soul man here. You're the pale ones. How's it feel? Oh, it sucks. It sucked. I went to the grocery store. They didn't treat me right. Really?
Yeah.
I got pulled over. I didn't do anything.
Yeah, and the original.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
And that's, I think, the genius of that premise, because the way the original series went, over time, they started turning it into, like, there was this huge meta arc where, like, Quinn's parents from a world, he was really from a different world, and he didn't know it, and he found out he was later, and he had a brother. And, and then there was also, like, there was, like, the evil, like, there was a planet where basically a different race became the dominant race on the planet instead of humans. They were the Cro-Mags.
Oh, I remember the Cro-Mags.
I remember that one.
And they like a different Quinn gave them the sliding technology because like they like tortured them or whatever. So then they're now taking over other worlds and they're like slider Nazis basically. And you don't need all that. Like if you do that, you're losing the premise of the show, which is each world is different. And I think having them always be disconnected Earths and then having it be the through lines is how it changes the characters and how the things they go through changes as opposed to the through line being this weird meta plot. I think it's a much better show.
So I have a backdoor idea on top of that, which is you do the whole season. The whole season's 4 people, and then the final episode, the season finale, before like Netflix is like, we're gonna do a second season of our sliders. They enter a world and they run into Quinn, Jerry O'Connell.
No,
as age he is now.
I love that.
Yep.
He's like, and they're like, who are you? He's like, I've been through this. Credits.
Me and this talking car have been sliding from universe to universe and just
He's in a
breaks
room
back
and
in.
Lord and Miller are standing there like, welcome to our world now, you dummies.
You guys are stupid idiots.
Your dumb slider can't do this thing my car can do.
So my final pitch is Jetsons. Just straight up, just the Jetsons. We have not really had a Jetsons thing for a while. And I think it's a fun, very of the like time it was made, like 60s pop art kind of a thing. And I'm like, well, then who do you give that to make it interesting? And in all honesty, give it to Denis Villeneuve. I want to see what that dude does with like the utopian future.
Yeah.
And be like, what is the Jetsons? And really like digs into who's George Jetson. He finally answers the question. That's the tagline on the poster.
So what are they going to be doing? Because it's so that's the one thing I always thought about the Jetsons is obviously they didn't imagine a bunch of people in there. But the other thing that was interesting was, okay, what's the distress? They always had some distress. The regular sitcom distress is like, my boss is coming over. We're going to carve our pills apart on the plate. But they're pot roast pills today. All that stuff. What would the larger meta plot be? Like what? Yeah.
To me, I think you do. So give it to Denis Villeneuve, and I think you do Revolutionary Road.
Oh my God.
Oh with Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like the dissolution of a future marriage.
Oh my God.
And how BS the suburbanite
Oh my God.
in the future.
You've been grinding up against the robot maid.
Don't think I don't see you. I look at the reports out of Alice.
The kids are just like plugged into the internet and they just don't care anymore.
Well, they did get into in the Jetsons movie that came out in the 80s. They did get into like this idea of like colonization and like how because there was the whole idea of like they were opening spacely sprockets on like an alien planet, and then it turned out they were like basically murdering the aliens to like make the sprockets, and it was like is this whole idea of like what fuels this utopia? Like what are the things that like
Bong Joon-ho doing Jetsons and it's Snowpiercer.
That'd be sick.
Space Piercer.
So, y'all, we want to hear what you think. What are some of these franchises? Do you like these ideas? What are franchises, if you wanted to grab onto, you would do so? Who would you give it to? What would you do with it? Let us know down in those comments. And we want to thank you guys so much for subscribing, for sharing, turning on the notifications, for commenting. Make sure you hit that bell. And on top of that, also, everybody, order Never Surrender. It's out. You can get it. Go down into the links are down below the video. Go get it. Never Surrender, the Galaxy Quest documentary that Fandom made. Go check it out. Let us know what you think on the Twitters. And then finally, Grit.
Yes, please check out the links below for more information on 826 LA. They are a fantastic foundation that helps students between the ages of 6 to 18 that may not have all of the resources at their disposal to really be able to sink their teeth into creative writing endeavors. And it not only helps teachers bring these resources to their students, but it also assists in school tutoring and weekend and evening workshops and after school workshops. And again, I think everyone in this room can say their lives have been changed by being able to learn that they can write and they can create these universes that they want. So this is an incredible program, and please look more into it when you can.
It's true. So thank you guys so much. Going around real quick, Riley, where can people find you online?
Hey, you can find me on Twitter at Riley J. Silverman, and you can find my writing on Nerdist.com and also on Sci-Fi Wire.
Fantastic. Gritton.
You can find me on @NestGrit on all forms of social media. If you can also find several of my writing work under Bunny Ears if you ever just want to look for some very weird, irreverent satire.
Ed, where should Nissan owners hit you up at?
Buick owners. Basically,
Go to yourcaristupid.com.
Yeah. I'm just saying your car isn't Kit, okay? People have been saying their car is Kit, and they're wrong. All right. Also, you can check me out at Ed Greer Destroys on Twitter, and I have podcasts called Reboot It, where we reboot movies, done with me and Billy Business and my boys from the Nerd Goat podcast, my other podcast. So both of those are ways to kind of engage with me talking to other people about some of this creative stuff.
Fantastic. You can check me out at the Cameron Rice over on Twitter. Make sure you watch me and Grit over on El Rey Nation. That's on the El Rey Network.
Yeah.
And every Thursday, y'all. And so thank you so much. And make sure you're following this show over on Screen Junkies U over on Twitter. We'll see you all next time, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.